Jose chose the church hall for it. Under stained glass and soft hymns with Pastor Michael Green, only a few steps away. He placed his hand on Delaney Russell's shoulder and told the room she was not in the right state of mind to handle $730 million. A soft laugh followed. Then silence. He said it gently. That made it worse. No one in that room knew that 3 nights earlier he had stood in their kitchen, tilting a small glass vial over her teacup. No one knew a video file had already been sent. And Jose did not yet understand that the most dangerous thing in that marriage was not the money. It was Delaney's silence. If you believe dignity matters more than noise, stay with this story until the very end. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from and your local time. And if you value quiet strength and justice that unfolds through truth, consider subscribing. The ticket did not look like $730 million. It looked like paper creased once down the center, smudged faintly at the corner. Where Delaney Russell's thumb had pressed too hard when she checked the numbers the first time. She had been sitting at the small oak desk in the back office of the Maple Ridge Public Library when she scanned it. Late afternoon light filtered through the narrow window above the filing cabinet. Outside, a boy rode his bike in circles while his mother pretended not to watch. Inside, Delaney stared at the screen. She checked the numbers again, and again. The third time, she did not breathe. The fourth time, she printed the confirmation page and compared each digit with the steadiness of someone cataloging a rare first edition. 7 numbers, exact match. $730, 000000. The narrator already knew what would follow in the days ahead, what would be poured into porcelain cups, and what would be captured on video. But in that quiet office, Delaney did not yet know the shape of the threat. She only felt its outline like cold air slipping under a door. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. Instead, she turned the ticket over and wrote the date and time in small, precise handwriting. 4:17 p.m. She wrote the store where she had bought it, Connolly's Market off Route 14. She wrote the name of the clerk who had sold it to her, Aaron, with a small silver hoop in his left ear. Then she locked the ticket inside the bottom drawer of her desk. Delaney Russell had never trusted sudden things. She was 42 years old, the director of a modest library in a Colorado town that prided itself on routine. She liked routines. They were honest. They told you what to expect. At 9:05 a.m., Mrs. Hathaway came in for historical fiction. At 3:30 p.m., teenagers hovered by the computers, pretending not to play games. At closing, Delaney turned off the lights herself. Predictability had texture. Wealth did not. When she drove home that evening, she kept both hands on the steering wheel and obeyed every speed limit sign as if someone were watching. Her house sat on a quiet street lined with cottonwoods. The siding needed repainting. The porch light flickered when the wind pushed too hard. It was not a house that looked like it contained a future worth $750 million. Jose Russell was already home. His truck occupied most of the driveway, angled slightly over the line, as it often was. He sold medical supply contracts across 3 counties, a job that required charm and persistence. He had both, at least in public. Inside, the smell of sautéed onions drifted from the kitchen. Music played low, something upbeat, something rhythmic. "Laney," he called as she stepped through the door. She paused for a fraction of a second before answering. "I'm here." Jose appeared from around the corner, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He kissed her cheek, quick and automatic. "How was work?" "Quiet," she said. He returned to the stove. "Good. Quiet's good." She watched him from the doorway. Jose was not a cruel man in the way people imagine cruelty. He did not shout without reason. He did not strike walls or leave bruises. He preferred subtler tools, suggestions disguised as concerned decisions, framed as efficiency. He handled the mortgage payments because he was better with numbers. He reviewed their joint account weekly just to keep things organized. When Delaney once forgot to transfer money between savings accounts, he had laughed softly and said, "That's why I'm here." It had sounded affectionate. It had also sounded final. They ate dinner at the small table by the window. Jose talked about a hospital administrator who had nearly signed a contract. Delaney nodded in the right places. The ticket's existence pressed gently against her thoughts, like a folded note tucked inside a book. She could have told him then. She did not. Instead, she washed the dishes, dried her hands carefully, and went upstairs. In the bedroom, she retrieved the small metal lockbox from the back of the closet, the one that held her passport and her mother's wedding ring. She placed the lottery ticket inside and turned the key. Then she sat on the edge of the bed. $730 million. Even after taxes, even after the structured payout, it would be more money than anyone in her family had ever seen. It could erase debts. It could build libraries in towns like hers. It could fund scholarships quietly, anonymously. It could also distort every relationship she had ever known. The narrator knew which of those outcomes would try hardest to surface. Downstairs, Jose laughed at something on television. Delaney opened her nightstand drawer and took out a small spiral notebook. It was the kind she used for inventory counts and supply orders. On the first page, she wrote April 12th. Verified ticket. No one informed. She paused, then added assess next steps carefully. Her handwriting did not tremble. The next morning, she woke before Jose and drove to the bank on the edge of town. She did not enter. She only sat in the parking lot and watched the doors open at 9. She needed information before she needed celebration. Back at the library, she used her office computer, not the one at home, to research lottery claim procedures in Colorado. She read about lump sums and annuities. She read about public disclosure requirements. She read about legal entities that could claim winnings through trusts. She printed nothing. Instead, she copied key details into her notebook. Chain of custody, legal counsel before claim, financial firewall. The phrases felt clinical, necessary. At noon, her phone buzzed. A text from Jose. Thinking about taking a few days off next month. Maybe Vegas celebrates something big. She stared at the message. Celebrate what he did not know. Not yet. When she returned home that evening, she found Jose in the garage reorganizing shelves that had not needed reorganizing. He was in a good mood, almost buoyant. "Laney," he said, stepping closer. "You ever think about what we'd do if we won the lottery?" The question landed too smoothly. She met his eyes. "Why, just asking, hypothetically." She tilted her head slightly. "Hypothetically, I'd make sure everything was protected first." He laughed. "Protected from who?" She held his gaze a second longer than usual. "Everyone," she said. He studied her face, searching for something. She offered him nothing. That night, after he fell asleep, Delaney lay awake and listened to the rhythm of his breathing. She had shared that rhythm for 16 years. She knew when it deepened, when it shifted, when it signaled real sleep. In the dark, she turned toward the nightstand and pulled out the notebook again. April 13th. Jose asked hypothetical lottery question. She underlined the word hypothetical. The narrator already understood that this moment. The quiet question in a garage that smelled of motor oil was the first visible crack. Not because Jose knew. He did not. But because Delaney was beginning to see. Money reveals the architecture of a person. It does not build it. She closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. Tomorrow she would tell him, not because she trusted him, but because secrets of that size change the air in a house. And she wanted to see how he breathed when the oxygen shifted. Outside, the wind pressed against the cottonwoods. Inside the lockbox, key rested beneath her pillow. $730 million waited in silence. So did Delaney Russell. Delaney chose a Tuesday. There was nothing symbolic about it. Tuesdays were ordinary. No church, no visitors, no lingering weekend energy. If something shifted, it would do so quietly. She waited until after dinner. Jose was rinsing his plate, humming under his breath, the sleeves of his button-down shirt rolled neatly to the elbow. The kitchen light cast a warm glow across the granite countertops he had insisted on installing 3 years earlier, an investment he had called it. "Jose," she said. He turned off the faucet. "Yeah, I need to tell you something. There are moments in a marriage when the air compresses without sound." The narrator could see it clearly, the subtle narrowing of Jose's eyes, the way his shoulders stilled before he faced her fully. "What is it?" he asked. Delaney did not dramatize it. She did not build suspense. "I bought a lottery ticket last week," she said evenly. "It won." He blinked once. "Oh." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "How much?" 730 million. The silence that followed lasted 3 full seconds. The narrator counted them. In the first second, Jose's brain rejected the number. In the second, it recalculated possibilities. In the third, something older than love flickered behind his eyes. He did not laugh. He did not ask if she was joking. He asked, "Where is it?" The question arrived too fast. "In a safe place," she replied. "Where?" he repeated. She folded her hands loosely in front of her. "Secure." Jose's gaze sharpened. "Delaney, that's not something you just tuck into a drawer." "I didn't." He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the walls might overhear. "Does anyone else know?" "No." Another pause. "Good," he said quickly. "Too quickly. That's good. We don't want people finding out before we figure this out." The narrator noted the shift immediately. The words slid into the room like a claim marker. Jose moved toward the table and sat down slowly, as if grounding himself. Okay, he exhaled. "So, what's the plan?" "I'm still researching," she said. "You haven't contacted anyone?" "Not yet." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "We need a financial advisor, a serious one, and a lawyer. And we should probably open a new account somewhere bigger. Denver, maybe? Not this small-town bank." He was speaking faster now, structuring, allocating. Delaney watched him. "You seem calm," he said suddenly, studying her face. "I am." He gave a short laugh. "Laney, that's almost $1 billion. After taxes, it won't be. That's not the point." She let the silence stretch. It unsettled him more than excitement would have. Jose leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Where's the ticket in a safe place?" she repeated. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You trust me, right?" he asked. The narrator understood the weight of that question. It was not a request for reassurance. It was a test of compliance. Delaney met his eyes. "Trust isn't the issue." "Then what is process?" He frowned slightly. "Process. I want to make sure everything is handled correctly." He stood up abruptly and began pacing the small length of the kitchen. "Of course. I'm saying the same thing. We handle it together." There it was again. Together. But his version of together had always meant access. "Do you have the numbers memorized?" he asked. "Yes. Let me see the ticket." "Not tonight." He stopped pacing. "Why not?" "Because nothing needs to happen tonight." His gaze lingered on her, searching for weakness, for doubt, for the part of her that might fold under pressure. He found none. The narrator, who knew what Jose would attempt days later in the glow of the stove light, saw the first fracture forming in him. Not anger, not yet. Frustration. Jose forced a smile. "Okay," he said lightly. "You're right. We take it slow." He stepped closer, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. "This changes everything, Laney." "Yes," she agreed. But not in the way he meant. Later that night, Jose lay awake longer than usual. He believed she did not notice the shift in his breathing. He stared at the ceiling, calculating. $730 million. Even if she chose a lump sum, even if taxes took nearly half, there would still be more money than either of them had ever imagined. He began listing upgrades in his mind. A house in Denver, a second property in Arizona, investments, maybe his own consultancy firm. He also considered risk. Lottery winners became targets. People changed around money. Spouses changed. What if she decided she didn't need him? The thought arrived sharp and unwelcome. Delaney beside him lay still. Her eyes were closed, but she was not asleep. She had felt the shift at dinner, the absence of laughter, the immediacy of the question. Where is it? He had not asked how she felt. He had not asked what she wanted. She turned slightly onto her side and opened her eyes in the darkness. Tomorrow she would contact an attorney, not because Jose had suggested it, but because of the way he had said we. The next morning, he brought her coffee in bed. A rare gesture. I was thinking, he said casually, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Maybe we should move the ticket somewhere safer, like a safety deposit box. I can take care of it today. She accepted the mug but did not drink yet. I'll handle it, she said. He smiled. Laney, this is complicated stuff. You shouldn't be dealing with it alone. I'm not. His brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means I'll make sure it's handled properly. He studied her carefully. For 16 years, Jose had understood the cadence of their marriage. He applied pressure. She absorbed it. He made decisions. She agreed or quietly adapted. This felt different. There was no defiance in her tone. There was distance. He set the empty tray aside. Just don't do anything without telling me, he said. She looked at him steadily. I won't do anything reckless. That was not the same promise. By noon, Jose had texted her twice. Have you called anyone? We should get ahead of this. She replied once. I'm handling it. At work, Delaney locked her office door and dialed a number she had written in her notebook, a Denver-based estate attorney recommended in 3 separate articles. The receptionist transferred her call. Whitmore and Hale, a measured male voice, answered. Gregory Whitmore speaking. She hesitated only briefly. My name is Delaney Russell, she said. I need advice regarding a substantial financial matter. Discretion is critical. There was a pause on the other end, not surprised, but attentive. I understand, Whitmore replied. When would you like to meet soon? They scheduled for Thursday. After she hung up, Delaney wrote in her notebook, April 14th. Jose asked to control the ticket. Repeated request. Noted urgency. She underlined urgency twice. The narrator, aware of the vial that would soon appear in Jose's hand, observed the pattern tightening. Jose did not see himself as a villain. He saw himself as practical, efficient, protective. But beneath those words lay something simpler. Control. That evening, when Delaney returned home, Jose was reorganizing the kitchen cabinets again. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking. About what security? He smiled thinly. You don't need to be afraid. She met his gaze. I'm not afraid, she said. Not yet. But she was watching. And Jose, who believed he was preparing to manage a fortune, did not realize that Delaney was preparing to measure him. The money had not changed her. It had revealed him. Jose chose chamomile. He said it would help her sleep. It was Thursday evening, the day she had driven to Denver and sat across from Gregory Whitmore in a quiet office lined with dark wood shelves. The meeting had been clinical, structured, and calm. She had not told Whitmore everything, only that she anticipated domestic complications. He had not pressed. Instead, he had spoken about trusts, controlled disbursements, and the importance of documentation. Documentation, he had said, is not suspicion. It is protection. Now she stood in the hallway outside the kitchen, her phone in her hand, halfway back from the bedroom where she had left it charging. She heard the faint scrape of ceramic against granite. The kitchen light was on. Jose's back was to her. He moved carefully, not hurried. The kettle had already finished steaming. A single mug sat near his right hand, white porcelain with a thin blue ring near the rim. Her mug. He reached into the pocket of his slacks. The narrator observed the sequence without judgment. Jose removed a small amber vial no larger than his thumb. He unscrewed the cap with deliberate steadiness. His shoulders were relaxed, his breathing even. He tapped the base of the vial twice against the edge of the mug. A fine stream of pale powder fell into the tea. Not much. Enough. He stirred it gently with a teaspoon, watching the liquid swirl until nothing visible remained. Then he placed the vial back into his pocket. "Laney," he called, tone light. "Tea's ready." She stepped forward, allowing her footsteps to register on the tile. "Yes," she said evenly. He turned. If he felt anything resembling guilt, it did not surface in his expression. "I figured you could use it," he said, offering the mug. "Long day." She accepted it without hesitation. The porcelain was warm against her palms. She lifted it slightly toward her lips, close enough for him to believe. The scent was normal. Chamomile, honey. "Thank you," she said. He watched her, not casually, attentively. The narrator knew this was the moment Jose believed control had returned to him. He had not intended immediate harm. Not necessarily. His thoughts had framed it differently. Sleep would calm her. Fatigue made people pliable. If she felt overwhelmed, he could suggest solutions. Documents, authorizations, shared access for safety. He did not see himself as poisoning her. He saw himself as stabilizing the situation. Delaney lowered the mug. "I forgot to send an email," she said. "I'll drink it upstairs." His eyes flicked to the cup. "Don't let it get cold." "I won't." She walked past him slowly, the mug steady in her hands. In the upstairs bathroom, she locked the door. She did not panic. Instead, she placed the mug on the counter and turned on the faucet to mask any sound. She tipped the contents carefully into the sink. The liquid spiraled down the drain, leaving faint flecks of residue clinging to porcelain. She did not rinse it fully. She examined the inside surface. Tiny grains remained near the curve of the base. She turned off the faucet. From the cabinet beneath the sink, she retrieved a pair of disposable gloves she had purchased earlier that afternoon at a pharmacy in Denver. She slipped them on, methodically. Using a clean paper towel, she wiped a small portion of the residue and folded it inward. Then she placed the towel inside a sealable plastic bag. Next, she wrapped the mug itself in another towel and slid it into a second bag. Everything was deliberate. Everything was quiet. Downstairs, Jose waited. He counted seconds in his head. 10, 20, 30. He expected her to return eyelids' heavier, movements slower. Instead, she emerged composed. Feeling sleepy already, he asked lightly. "A little," she said. It was not entirely untrue. Adrenaline mimics exhaustion. He smiled. "Good." She sat beside him on the couch, but did not drink again. He reached for the remote, selecting a documentary neither of them cared about. His posture loosened as minutes passed. She rested her head against the back cushion, eyes half-lidded. He watched her more than the screen. After 15 minutes, he touched her knee gently. "You okay, Mom? You should get some rest." She nodded slowly and stood. In the bedroom, she changed into pajamas and turned off the light. She lay on her side facing the wall. Jose remained downstairs another half hour before joining her. When he slid into bed, he paused. She appeared deeply asleep. He studied her breathing. Steady. He allowed himself a small exhale. The narrator understood that this was the first step in a series Jose had already outlined mentally. If tonight passed without issue, he would escalate. Slightly stronger dose. Slightly more frequency. Each step rationalized. Each step incremental. What he did not account for was Delaney's refusal to react visibly. In the darkness, her eyes opened. She listened to his breathing change as he drifted into sleep. Then slowly, she reached beneath her pillow and retrieved her notebook. Using the faint glow of her phone screen, she wrote April 15th, 8:42 p.m. Observed Jose add unknown powder to chamomile tea. Amber vial. Approx. 3, 4 light taps. Retained mug. Retained residue sample. Her handwriting remained precise. She added, did not ingest. She closed the notebook. In the morning, she rose before him. She placed the sealed bags inside a small insulated container in her car trunk. She would not act impulsively. Whitmore had been clear. Chain of custody matters. Speculation does not. At breakfast, Jose poured her coffee. "You slept hard," he said casually. "I must have been tired." He smiled faintly. "See, I told you the tea would help." She met his eyes across the table. "Yes," she said softly. "You did." He held her gaze half a second too long, searching for suspicion. He found none. Later that afternoon, she sent a brief email from her work account. Subject: follow-up question. She did not describe the event in detail. Only this: if a spouse introduces an unknown substance into food or drink, what immediate steps ensure admissible documentation? Whitmore replied within an hour. Preserve sample. Avoid contamination. Do not confront. Schedule meeting. She scheduled it for the following morning. That evening, Jose suggested tea again. She declined gently. "Not tonight." He tilted his head slightly. "You sure I'm fine?" He watched her walk upstairs. In the kitchen, he removed the vial from his pocket and turned it over in his hand. He believed he was careful. He believed subtlety equaled invisibility. But somewhere in a small, insulated container in the trunk of Delaney Russell's car sat a porcelain mug and a folded paper towel that would eventually speak louder than either of them. And Jose, standing alone beneath the kitchen light, did not yet understand that the most dangerous response to betrayal is not rage. It is documentation. Delaney did not go straight to Gregory Whitmore the next morning. She went to work first. Routine was armor. If Jose noticed deviation too soon, he would adjust. And adjustment was something she could not afford. At 9 o'clock sharp, she unlocked the library doors. By 9:15, Mrs. Hathaway had claimed her usual armchair. At 10, a mother asked about early literacy programs. Delaney answered gently, efficiently, as she always did. Inside her, however, everything had shifted into a different register. The insulated container sat in the trunk of her car in the staff parking lot. It was not evidence yet, not legally. It was potential, and potential required structure. At 11:30 a.m., she stepped into her office and closed the door. Instead of calling Whitmore immediately, she dialed another number one she had memorized years ago. Avery Collins came the familiar voice on the second ring. Crisp, alert. "It's Delaney," she said. There was warmth in Avery's tone instantly. "Laney, you sound measured. That means something's wrong." Avery had always been perceptive. They had met in college, two scholarship students navigating rooms filled with louder personalities. Avery had gone into law, Delaney into library sciences. Both understood the power of paper trails. "I need general guidance," Delaney said carefully. "Hypothetically." Avery laughed softly. Hypothetically is usually not hypothetical. If someone suspects their spouse is introducing an unknown substance into their drink, what should they do first? Silence. Not shocked silence, legal silence. "Have you ingested it?" Avery asked. "No." "Do you have a sample?" "Yes." "Is it preserved?" "Yes." A pause. "Then you don't confront Avery," said evenly. "You document, and you bring it to a licensed attorney or law enforcement with proper chain of custody. Don't test it yourself. Don't accuse. Don't escalate." Delaney leaned back in her chair. "Understood." And Laney Avery added, "Yes, if this isn't hypothetical, you are not overreacting." Delaney did not answer that directly. "I have a meeting with an estate attorney this afternoon," she said. "I'll discuss next steps," Good Avery replied. "And email yourself a summary of events with timestamps. From an account he doesn't access. Create a record that can't be altered." Delaney glanced at her computer screen. "I already have." "Of course you do," Avery said quietly. After they hung up, Delaney opened a new encrypted email account she'd created the night before. She drafted a detailed account of the tea incident date time, positioning description of vile exact wording Jose used. She attached photographs she had taken that morning of the sealed bags and the mug before placing them in the container. She sent the email to herself, time-stamped, immutable. The narrator understood something Jose did not. Delaney was not acting emotionally. She was building a framework. That afternoon, she drove to Denver again. Gregory Whitmore's office felt unchanged from the previous day. Calm, insulated, deliberate. He stood as she entered, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "You mentioned urgency," he said. "Yes." She placed the insulated container on his desk without flourish. "I need to discuss criminal implications," she said evenly. Whitmore's expression shifted, not alarmed, but sharpened. "Tell me everything," he said. She did. She described the kitchen light, the amber vial, the tapping motion, the stirring. She described not drinking it. She described preserving the residue. Whitmore did not interrupt. He took notes in careful script. When she finished, he leaned back slightly. "You did the correct thing by not confronting him," he said. "Emotionally, that's difficult. Legally, it's essential." "Is this enough?" she asked. "It's a start," he replied. "We need laboratory confirmation of the substance. And we must ensure proper evidentiary handling." He opened a drawer and removed a pair of evidence bags labeled with official markings. "I'm not a criminal defense attorney," he continued, "but I work closely with firms that are... If this is what you believe it is, we move cautiously." He documented the transfer of the container from her possession to his noting date and time. He asked her to sign a receipt verifying handover. Chain of custody had begun. "What if it's harmless?" she asked quietly. Whitmore met her eyes. "Then you've still documented an unexplained act of concealment. That matters." He paused. "Has he shown any unusual urgency regarding financial control?" "Yes." "Paperwork?" "Yes." "Requests to access the ticket?" "Yes." Whitmore nodded once, as if assembling a puzzle whose image was already familiar. "Money can accelerate intentions," he said. Sometimes, intentions people didn't know they had. Delaney absorbed that without visible reaction. "What do you recommend?" she asked. "First, we establish the trust immediately. Separate entity. Restricted access. Second, we notify a forensic lab through proper channels. Third, we do not alter your daily routine. And law enforcement, not until we have lab confirmation," he said. "We avoid speculation." She nodded. Outside the office, traffic moved in steady lines. Inside, paperwork shifted quietly across polished wood. Whitmore drafted preliminary trust documents that afternoon. Delaney reviewed them line by line. She asked precise questions. She initialed where necessary. Jose texted twice during the meeting. "How's your day? We should talk tonight about next steps." She did not reply until she was back in her car. "Busy? We can talk." When she returned home, Jose was seated at the kitchen table with a folder in front of him. "I've been thinking," he began. She set her purse down slowly. "About structure," he said. "We need to consolidate everything. I talked to a colleague whose cousin is in finance. He said the worst thing we could do is hesitate." She studied the folder. "May I see?" He slid it across the table. Inside were printed templates, joint account authorizations, beneficiary update. Forms a draft power of attorney, granting broad financial discretion in the event of mental or emotional incapacity. She felt no surge of anger, only confirmation. "You've been busy," she said evenly. "I'm just being proactive," he replied. "You tend to freeze under pressure." It was delivered gently, almost kindly. The narrator noted the strategy undermined competence before assuming control. Delaney closed the folder. "I'll review these," she said. Jose's smile tightened slightly. "There's nothing complicated in there. I prefer to read carefully." He leaned back in his chair, studying her as if recalculating a route. "You're acting different," he said. "Different how? Detached." She considered that. "Prepared," she corrected. He laughed softly. "Prepared for what? For responsibility." He held her gaze. In his mind, she was slipping beyond predictable boundaries. Not defiant, not hysterical, controlled. Control unsettled him. Later that night, as Jose showered, Delaney opened the folder again. She photographed every page and uploaded the images to her encrypted account. She added another entry to her notebook, April 16th. Jose presented financial control documents. Includes broad POA referencing incapacity. She underlined incapacity. The narrator knew something else now. The substance in the tea would test positive. And Jose, who believed he was accelerating security, was accelerating exposure. Downstairs, water turned off. Footsteps approached. Delaney closed the notebook and placed it back beneath the drawer liner. She turned off the lamp. When Jose entered the bedroom, he smiled. "We're going to be fine," he said. She looked at him calmly. "Yes," she replied, "but not in the way he imagined." Gregory Whitmore did not call with urgency. He called with precision. "Mrs. Russell," he said the following afternoon, his voice, even the sample, has been transferred to a certified forensic laboratory. We should have preliminary results within 48 hours. Delaney stood in the staff break room at the library, staring at the vending machine without seeing it. "Thank you," she replied. "In the meantime," he continued, "we move forward with asset protection. The trust documents are ready for signature. I recommend executing them immediately. I can come this evening. That would be wise." He paused, then added gently, "Are you safe in your home?" The question was clinical, necessary. "Yes," she said. It was not entirely untrue. Jose had not escalated beyond subtlety. He had not raised his voice. He had not touched her in anger. He had offered tea. But the narrator understood what Whitmore suspected. The line between subtle and severe often narrows quickly when financial control is threatened. That evening, Delaney drove to Denver again. Jose had asked where she was going. "Inventory audit at work ran late," she said. "Then errands." He studied her face for longer than usual before nodding. "Don't overdo it," he said softly. She smiled faintly. "I won't." Whitmore's office lights glowed warmly against the dimming sky when she arrived. Inside, the atmosphere remained insulated from urgency, as if crisis could not cross the threshold without an appointment. She signed the trust documents carefully. The entity would be named the Russell Educational Foundation Trust, a neutral title. No indication of personal control. Whitmore had structured it so that distributions required dual authorization, Delaney and an independent fiduciary. Jose's name did not appear. "This ensures no unilateral access," Whitmore explained, "even in the event of marital dispute." "And if he contests?" she asked. "He can attempt to," Whitmore said. "But documentation matters. Your timing matters." Timing. Delaney understood that word intimately now. After signing, she hesitated. "There's something else," she said quietly. Whitmore waited. "He's pressing harder about control. Paperwork? Authority?" Whitmore folded his hands. "If the lab confirms what you suspect, we will notify law enforcement immediately," he said. "Until then, maintain normalcy. Do not confront. Do not signal awareness." She nodded. "Has he attempted another administration?" Whitmore asked carefully. "Not yet. Be prepared that he might." The narrator already knew he would. When Delaney returned home, Jose was seated at the kitchen island with his laptop open. He looked up as she entered. "You've been busy," he said lightly. "Yes. Work? Yes." He closed the laptop halfway, but not entirely. "What's the holdup?" he asked. "With the claim. I'm structuring it properly." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "With who?" he asked. "Professionals." He stood slowly. "Laney, I don't like not being involved." She placed her keys on the counter. "You are involved," she said calmly. "But I will not rush." His tone shifted, still soft, but edged. "You're acting like I'm the enemy." She held his gaze steadily. "I'm acting like this is serious." He studied her face, searching for cracks. In his mind, she had always been predictable. Thoughtful, yes, but pliable under sustained pressure. Now she was something else, measured. That night, he brewed tea again. She declined. "Headache," she said. He nodded slowly, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Maybe tomorrow." In the darkness of their bedroom, Jose lay awake long after Delaney's breathing slowed. He replayed the past week in his mind. Her secrecy, her independence, her refusal to hand over the ticket. He told himself he was protecting their future. If she mishandled the money, they could lose everything. Advisors could manipulate her. Family could pressure her. He convinced himself of this narrative repeatedly. control equaled safety. Safety justified action. The vial sat inside the pocket of a jacket hanging in the hallway closet. He had increased the dosage slightly the second night. Not enough to harm, enough to induce confusion. But she had not seemed confused, only distant. The narrator understood the flaw in his reasoning. He mistook silence for submission. 2 days later, Whitmore called again. "The laboratory results are back," he said. Delaney stood in her office door, closed, heart steady, and she asked. "The substance is zolpidem tartrate," he said evenly. "A prescription sedative. The concentration present in the residue indicates a dose exceeding typical therapeutic levels." She closed her eyes briefly. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. "In that quantity, particularly if repeated, it could impair cognition, memory formation, and motor coordination. Combined with alcohol or fatigue, risk increases. Not immediately lethal, but disabling, strategic." Delaney exhaled slowly. "What are our next steps?" she asked. "We notify law enforcement," Whitmore said, "and we prepare a protective order request." The narrator could see the path unfolding now: emails, affidavits, timestamps. "Do I leave the house?" she asked. "Not abruptly," Whitmore replied. "We coordinate with authorities first." That evening, Detective Laura Bennett was briefed. A methodical officer with 15 years of experience in domestic financial crimes, Bennett did not react with shock. She reacted with procedure. Video evidence would strengthen the case, she explained. Physical documentation was strong, but visual corroboration would be decisive. Delaney listened carefully. "Install cameras legally," Bennett advised. "Colorado is a one-party consent state for audio, but placement matters. We ensure admissibility." The plan took shape without drama. 2 days later, while Jose was at work, a licensed security technician installed discrete cameras in the kitchen, visible only upon close inspection. The devices were registered and documented properly. Delaney did not tell Jose. That night, he watched her carefully at dinner. "You seem tired," he said. "Long week. I could make tea." She met his eyes. "All right," she said. The narrator felt the tightening of the arc. Jose moved through the motions with controlled normalcy. Kettle, mug, honey. Then from the hallway closet he retrieved the jacket. He removed the vial. The kitchen camera captured everything. The unscrewing of the cap, the slight tilt of the wrist, the powder dissolving. He stirred once, twice. He replaced the vial. "Laney," he called softly. "It'll help." She stepped into frame. She accepted the mug, and for a fraction of a second their eyes locked. He believed he was guiding her toward compliance. She knew she was guiding him toward evidence. Upstairs, she poured the tea down the sink again. Downstairs, the cloud server uploaded the footage automatically. And in a secure office miles away, a timestamp embedded itself into a digital file that would soon outlive every excuse Jose could construct. He did not yet understand. The most dangerous part of a quiet woman is not what she says. It is what she saves. Jose did not realize the camera had a wider angle than he expected. He assumed that if anything in the kitchen recorded, it would capture only the countertop, not the hallway closet, not the slight pause before he reached into the jacket pocket, not the moment his fingers hesitated, as if weighing whether escalation was necessary. But the frame was generous. It documented patience. The morning after the second recorded incident, Delaney woke before dawn. She did not check the footage immediately. She already knew what it would show. Instead, she brewed her own coffee, plain black, and stood at the kitchen sink watching the first hint of light move across the yard. Jose entered 15 minutes later. "You're up early," he said. "So are you." He leaned against the counter, studying her face. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Well enough." "Tea helped." She turned slightly toward him. "I didn't drink it." The words were soft, not accusatory, merely factual. A flicker crossed his expression. Quick, contained. "You didn't," he said lightly. "I wasn't thirsty." He nodded slowly. "Maybe tonight." She did not respond. The narrator observed the recalibration happening inside him. Increased dosage had not yielded visible impairment. She was still clear-eyed, still steady. He would need leverage elsewhere. Later that afternoon, while Delaney was at work, Jose made 3 phone calls. The first was to a regional bank manager he knew casually through sales networking events. "Just hypothetically," he said, keeping his tone relaxed, "if a spouse wins a large lottery and seems overwhelmed, what's the best way to streamline financial authority?" The bank manager laughed awkwardly. "That's above my pay grade, Jose." The second call was to an acquaintance who handled real estate investments. The third was to a family friend, an older cousin who had once navigated a contentious divorce. Each conversation planted seeds. Overwhelmed, unstable, needs help managing. The narrator understood that this was Jose's parallel strategy: build a narrative of concern before building a claim of control. That evening, Delaney received a notification from the cloud server. Footage uploaded successfully. She waited until Jose left for his weekly basketball game before reviewing it. She sat at her desk upstairs, laptop open, headphones in. The video began with ordinary kitchen sounds: cabinet doors, water running. Then the hallway closet opened. Jose's hand appeared in frame. The amber vial was unmistakable. The camera captured the exact angle of the pour, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the deliberate stir. It was not hurried. It was not accidental. It was methodical. Delaney did not cry. She watched it twice. Then she downloaded the file and forwarded it to Gregory Whitmore and Detective Laura Bennett. Subject line: second incident. Video attached. Timestamp intact. Within an hour, Detective Bennett responded, "We have enough to proceed." The next steps were procedural. An official report would be filed the following morning. A warrant request prepared. A temporary protective order drafted. Delaney closed her laptop and sat very still. 16 years of marriage had just shifted into a legal case. She walked into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She did not look broken. She looked awake. Downstairs, the front door opened. Jose returned earlier than expected. "You're still up?" he asked casually, stepping into the bedroom doorway. "Yes." He studied her face. "You've been distant," he said quietly. "I've been thinking. About me, about responsibility." He entered the room, fully closing the door behind him. "Laney," he said, voice lowering, "people are going to come after us. Advisors, lawyers, strangers. You can't handle that alone. I'm not alone." The words were calm. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. "Professionals." He stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell me?" She held his gaze. "Because I needed clarity first." His jaw tightened. "You don't trust me?" She did not answer immediately. Trust, she understood now, was not a feeling. It was a calculation based on behavior. He mistook her silence for guilt. "I'm your husband," he said. "Yes, that means something. It does." But not what he believed. The narrator saw what Jose could not. The more he pressed, the narrower his options became. The following morning, Detective Bennett met Delaney at the library before opening hours. The conversation was private, structured, quiet. "We'll request a search warrant for the residence," Bennett said, "specifically targeting controlled substances, documentation, and digital devices." "Will he know it was me?" Delaney asked. "Yes," Bennett replied honestly, "but the protective order will be active simultaneously." Delaney nodded. "Do not alert him," Bennett continued. "Act normal. Normal." The word felt almost ironic now. That afternoon, Jose texted her, "Dinner out tonight. Celebrate progress." She stared at the message. Progress toward what? "Maybe tomorrow," she replied. He called instead of texting. "Why are you pulling away?" he asked, voice low. "I'm not, you are." She let the silence stretch. "You're overthinking," he said finally. "This is good news. We should be excited." "I am cautious," she said. "Cautious of what?" She almost answered truthfully. Instead, she said, "Change." He exhaled sharply. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Perhaps she thought, but hardness was preferable to blindness. That night, he brewed tea again. For the third time, the camera recorded the repetition. This time, his movements were quicker, slightly irritated. He tapped the vial twice, stirred with less care. When she entered the kitchen, he forced a smile. "For your nerves," he said. She accepted the mug. She looked at him steadily. "Jose," she said quietly, "why are you so eager to manage everything?" He blinked. "I'm not eager," he replied. "I'm responsible. For me, for us." The narrator understood the difference. Responsibility protects, control confines. Upstairs, the tea met the sink once more. In the cloud, another file locked itself into permanence. The next morning, as Jose left for work, 2 unmarked vehicles turned slowly onto the street. Delaney watched from behind the curtain. She did not feel triumph. She felt gravity. 16 years had narrowed into a series of timestamps and sealed envelopes. By afternoon, a warrant would be signed. By evening, the hallway closet would be opened by someone other than Jose. He still believed he was ahead. He believed he was shaping the outcome. He did not know that every pore, every gentle insistence, every carefully chosen word about her instability had already been archived. And documentation, once it begins, does not stop because someone decides to behave differently. It simply waits. The warrant was signed at 2:14 p.m. Delaney knew the exact time because Detective Laura Bennett texted her a single line approved. "We move at 5:30. The message contained no emotion. It did not need to. At 4:45 p.m., Jose called. "I might be a little late," he said. Client meeting ran over. Delaney stood in the kitchen looking at the counter where the kettle usually rested. "That's fine," she replied. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes, you sound tired. Long day." There was a pause. "I'll make tea when I get home," he said. She closed her eyes briefly. "That won't be necessary." He laughed softly. "You've been refusing my tea a lot lately. I've been drinking coffee. Too much caffeine isn't good for anxiety," he said gently. "Anxiety." The word hung there, deliberate. "I'll see you soon," he added. At 5:27 p.m., 2 unmarked vehicles rolled quietly onto the street again. A third parked at the corner. Detective Bennett stepped out first, calm and methodical. 2 uniformed officers followed. Delaney opened the door before they knocked. Mrs. Russell Bennett said quietly, "We'll keep this professional. I understand." They entered without spectacle. No raised voices, no flashing lights. The narrator observed the house with detached clarity, the cottonwood shadows stretching across the lawn, the porch light that flickered in, and the granite countertops Jose had insisted on installing. One officer remained at the door. Another moved toward the hallway closet. Bennett walked directly to the kitchen. "Camera placement," she asked. Delaney gestured subtly toward the upper cabinet trim. Bennett nodded once. "We'll retrieve the footage from your secure upload," she said. "You won't need to handle it further." The closet door opened. The jacket was still there. Inside the pocket, the amber vial. Gloves were used, evidence bag sealed, timestamp recorded. Bennett examined the label. Prescription. Not in Delaney's name. "Good documentation," Bennett said quietly. They photographed the kitchen, the mug cabinet, the kettle, the sink. They did not dramatize the act. They cataloged it. At 5:41 p.m., Jose's truck pulled into the driveway. The narrator marked the time. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, humming under his breath. The front door was open. That alone unsettled him. He paused at the threshold. Laney. He stepped inside and froze. 2 officers stood near the hallway. Detective Bennett faced him squarely. "Mr. Russell," she said evenly, "we have a search warrant." For a moment, he did not process the words. "Search warrant," he repeated, voice light, almost amused. "For what controlled substances and related materials?" Bennett replied. His eyes flicked to Delaney. She stood near the kitchen island, hands loosely clasped. Calm. "What is this?" he demanded, tone sharpening. Bennett continued without raising her voice. "We also have evidence of repeated administration of a prescription sedative without the recipient's knowledge." His face drained slightly of color. "That's absurd," he said quickly. I don't even know what you're talking about. The amber vial recovered from your jacket pocket is prescribed under a different name, Bennett said. Would you like to explain? He swallowed. That's for travel, he stammered. I have insomnia. It's not prescribed to you. He looked at Delaney again. You did this? He asked, incredulous. She did not answer. The narrator understood why confrontation invites chaos. Silence invites exposure. Jose's voice rose slightly. Laney, this is insane. I was helping you sleep. With prescription medication not issued to you, Bennett said evenly. It's harmless, he insisted. It's just a sleep aid. In quantities exceeding standard dosage, Bennett replied. He turned fully toward Delaney now. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said, anger seeping through. You've been paranoid for days. There it was. Paranoid. Bennett glanced briefly at Delaney, then back at him. Mr. Russell, she said calmly, we also have video footage? Silence fell heavily into the room. His expression shifted not to guilt, but to recalculation. Video, he said carefully. Yes, of what of you introducing the substance into Mrs. Russell's tea on multiple occasions? His breathing changed. He stopped. For the first time since the officers arrived, he looked uncertain. I was just trying to help her relax, he said finally. She's been overwhelmed. By what Bennett asked. By the lottery, he snapped before catching himself. The word landed sharply in the quiet kitchen. Bennett's gaze sharpened. Lottery, she repeated. Jose realized too late. Delaney had not publicly claimed the prize yet. Hypothetical, he said quickly. I meant hypothetically. But the damage was done. The narrator observed the fracture widening. His composure depended on narrative control. And the narrative had slipped. At 6:02 p.m., Bennett informed him he would need to come to the station for questioning. You're not under arrest at this moment, she clarified. But this is a formal investigation. He looked at Delaney as if waiting for her to intervene. She did not. He shook his head in disbelief. You think I would hurt you? He asked her directly. She met his eyes. I think you wanted control, she said softly. That's not the same thing. Not always, she replied. He let out a sharp breath, half laugh, half scoff. You're making a mistake, he said. The narrator knew he believed that. Because in his mind, he had not intended death. He had intended compliance, and compliance to him felt justified. As the officers escorted him toward the door, he stopped once more. This will ruin us, he said. Delaney stood very still. No, she said quietly. It already did. The door closed behind him. The house fell silent. Detective Bennett remained a moment longer. A temporary protective order will be active tonight, she said. He won't be permitted to return. Delaney nodded. Do you have somewhere to stay? I'll remain here, she said. Bennett studied her. If he contacts you, document everything. I will. When the officers left, the house felt unfamiliar, not unsafe, just altered. Delaney walked into the kitchen and touched the countertop lightly as if confirming solidity. 16 years, reduced to evidence bags and timestamps. She did not collapse. She did not weep. Instead, she opened her notebook. April 22nd. Warrant executed. Vial recovered. Jose referenced lottery aloud. She underlined the final sentence once. Outside, the cottonwoods shifted in evening wind. Inside, the kettle remained cold. The narrator understood that this was not climax. It was transition, because exposure is not the same as consequence. And Jose, sitting in a small interview room miles away, was already constructing his defense. Jose asked for a lawyer before the first question was finished. Detective Laura Bennett had expected that. Men like Jose Russell did not rely on innocence. They relied on process. If they could slow a situation down, they could reshape it. In the interview room, fluorescent light flattened his features. He sat with his hands clasped, posture-controlled eyes steady. I want counsel, he said again, as if repetition made the room obey him. You'll have counsel, Bennett replied evenly. This is your right. He nodded once. Relieved, not because he was protected, but because he was no longer required to improvise. The narrator already knew what Jose would tell his attorney later. My wife was unstable. I was trying to calm her. I never meant harm. She's overreacting because of the money. He would say it like a man describing weather. Back at the house, Delaney moved through the evening with a quiet precision that looked almost ordinary from the outside. She made herself toast. She fed the neighbor's cat that sometimes wandered into her yard. She locked the doors. Then she opened her laptop. Not the one Jose had ever used. She logged into the encrypted email account Avery Collins had advised her to create and scrolled through the growing chain of messages with Gregory Whitmore and Detective Bennett. The files were there. Video attachments, lab results receipts of evidence transfer timestamps that did not care about excuses. She forwarded the latest incident report warrant execution vial recovery Jose's spontaneous mention of the lottery to Whitmore and Avery. Subject, next phase. Within minutes, Avery replied, "I'm proud of you for staying quiet. Now stay smart. Don't engage him directly. Save everything." Proud was not a word Delaney needed, but she understood the intention behind it: reinforcement. A reminder that calm was not weakness. Whitmore's response arrived an hour later. "Tomorrow morning, we finalize banking controls and coordinate with the fiduciary. I also recommend initiating formal separation counsel. The criminal case and civil protection should proceed in parallel." Parallel. Two tracks of justice, one designed to punish wrongdoing, the other designed to prevent future harm. Delaney closed the laptop and took out her notebook. April 22nd. Jose removed from home pending investigation. Protective order active. Next, banking controls separation counsel. She wrote the word banking in capital letters, because money was still the bait. The next morning, she did not go to the library first. She went to Denver. Whitmore met her at 8. His office looked unchanged, but the folder on his desk was thicker now. More pages, more signatures, more inevitability. "We have to assume he will attempt access," Whitmore said without melodrama. "Not just to funds, but to information. Passwords, contact details, account recovery." Delaney nodded. "He's already tried." Whitmore looked up. "Tell me what you've seen." She pulled out a printed screenshot of a bank notification, an alert she had set quietly when the trust structure was first initiated. An attempted login, a request to change communication preferences, a call record from the bank's customer service portal. Each item had a date and time. Jose had been phishing even before law enforcement entered their home. Whitmore's expression tightened slightly. "This is good," he said, meaning it in the most professional way. "It establishes intent and pattern." "Will it matter in court?" Delaney asked. "It matters everywhere," he replied. "Criminally, it supports motive. Civilly, it supports protective relief. Financially, it justifies restrictions." He slid a document toward her. "A formal letter to the bank notification of potential fraud risk request for heightened authentication instruction to flag any inquiries from unauthorized parties, and confirmation that no changes would be accepted without in-person verification and dual approval." "You'll sign here," Whitmore said, "and our fiduciary will sign as well." Delaney signed. Her signature did not look like anger. It looked like a line drawn with a steady hand. Afterward, Whitmore made a call on speakerphone. A calm voice answered, an independent fiduciary named Marianne Keene, the kind of professional who sounded like she lived in legal language. "Miss Russell, Marianne," said, "I've reviewed the trust structure. I understand this isn't merely asset planning. It's risk containment." "That's correct," Delaney replied. "Then we'll operate accordingly," Marianne said. "No disbursements without my approval and yours. All communications will be logged. Any contact attempts from your spouse will be documented." Delaney did not thank her emotionally. She thanked her precisely. When the call ended, Whitmore turned back to Delaney. "One more step," he said. "We build the broader paper trail, emails, bank logs, any messages he sends now. If he contacts you, do not respond beyond what your counsel advises. Save everything." Delaney nodded again. By noon, her phone buzzed. A call from Jose. The protective order meant he was not supposed to contact her directly. He called anyway. Delaney did not answer. A voicemail arrived seconds later. His voice was controlled, almost gentle, as if he were leaving a message for a colleague. "Laney, this has gotten out of hand. I'm not mad. I'm worried. Call me so we can fix this before you ruin your own life." She did not delete it. She saved it. Then she forwarded the voicemail file to Detective Bennett and Whitmore with a single line of text violation. 12:07 p.m. She watched the message send, then set the phone down. At 12:19 p.m., a second voicemail arrived. "You don't understand how bad this looks for you?" Jose said, voice slightly sharper now. "People are going to think you're unstable. You're letting strangers get in your head. I was helping you sleep. That's it. Unstable. Again." The narrator noted how predictably he returned to the same word, as if repetition could make it evidence. Delaney forwarded the second voicemail as well. At 12:33 p.m., a text message arrived from an unfamiliar number. "This is Jose's attorney. Please have Delaney contact my office regarding a resolution." Whitmore had warned her once counsel entered, everything became a contest of narratives. Delaney did not respond directly. She forwarded it to Whitmore. Then she returned to the library. If Jose expected her to unravel, she would not feed that expectation. At Maple Ridge, the day unfolded with its usual quiet requests. A teenager asked for help printing a job application. Mrs. Hathaway complained about the new shelving system. Someone returned a book with a coffee stain. Delaney answered them all with the same calm competence. And yet the narrator could see the double life running beneath the surface, a woman shelving books while her marriage became a case file. At 3:40 p.m., a bank alert pinged again. Attempted access, incorrect security answers. Jose was trying. Delaney did not flinch. She took a screenshot, saved it into her secure folder, and emailed it to Whitmore. Subject, additional attempt. The narrator understood what this meant in a way Jose did not. Jose believed control would return through persistence. But persistence was exactly what built patterns. Patterns became evidence. Evidence became consequence. That evening, Detective Bennett called Delaney. "We received your voicemails," Bennett said. "They're documented as violations. We're updating the protective order request accordingly." Delaney listened. "Your bank logs are also useful," Bennett added. "They support motive and show he was attempting to gain access." Delaney stared out her office window at the cottonwoods shifting in wind. "Will there be charges?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Bennett said. "Likely several. But understand the timeline matters. Prosecutors will build it carefully. Carefully." That word again. Delaney's entire strategy had been carefulness. The narrator, aware of the ending already written in courthouse ink, watched Delaney close her notebook and place it back in her drawer. She did not feel victory. She felt something steadier alignment. Truth aligned with documentation. Documentation aligned with procedure. Procedure slowly aligned with justice. And somewhere in an attorney's office across town, Jose sat and complained that Delaney had become cold, that she was making accusations, that she was confused by money. He would not understand until later that her coldness was not cruelty. It was clarity. The church hall smelled faintly of lemon polish and old hymnals. It was Saturday evening, and the annual community fundraiser had drawn nearly everyone from Maple Ridge teachers, retirees, business owners' families, who had lived there long enough to forget when they arrived. Delaney had considered not attending. Detective Bennett had advised caution, but not isolation. Live normally, she had said. Abusers often rely on social narrative. Don't surrender public space. So Delaney went. She wore a simple navy dress. No jewelry except her mother's ring. No visible strain. The narrator knew this night would matter not because of spectacle, but because of subtlety. Jose was there. The protective order allowed limited public proximity as long as no direct contact occurred. His attorney had ensured that technical detail. He stood near the refreshment table speaking to Pastor Michael Green with the relaxed posture of a man who believed he still belonged. When Delaney entered, several heads turned not dramatically but curiously. News traveled quietly in small towns. Jose saw her almost immediately. For a fraction of a second, surprise flickered across his face. Then composure returned. He excused himself from Pastor Green and approached her not close enough to violate distance, but near enough to be seen speaking. "Laney," he said softly. She stopped a few feet away. "Yes, you didn't tell me you were coming. I've attended every year." His smile was gentle, curated for witnesses. "We should talk," he said. "That would need to go through counsel." A couple passing by slowed subtly. Jose exhaled as if burdened. "This doesn't have to be so public," he said. "It already is," she replied. He tilted his head slightly, lowering his voice. "You're making me look like a criminal." The narrator observed the irony without comment. She did not answer. Pastor Green approached, sensing tension without understanding its shape. "Everything all right?" he asked warmly. Jose responded before Delaney could. "Just a misunderstanding," he said with a faint, weary smile. "Delaney's been under a lot of stress lately." There it was. Stress. The beginning of a performance. Pastor Green looked at Delaney gently. "We're praying for peace in your home." "Thank you," she said calmly. Jose placed his hand lightly against his chest, projecting sincerity. "She's overwhelmed," he continued. "Big decisions, financial pressure. It's a lot for anyone." The word financial drifted through the air like a test balloon. A nearby teacher glanced over. Delaney felt the shift, not in volume, but in narrative. Jose was building the social record. She did not defend herself. She did not contradict him. She simply said, "I'm managing." Jose sighed as if disappointed. "She won't let me help," he said softly to Pastor Green, but loud enough for others to hear. The narrator knew that tone. It had been used in kitchens and living rooms before. Concern disguised as authority. Pastor Green nodded sympathetically. "Well, marriage requires patience," he said gently. "Of course," Jose replied quickly. "That's all I've been trying to offer." Delaney looked at him steadily. "I'm sure that's how you see it," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not tremble. It simply existed. A few minutes later, as people moved toward the silent auction tables, Jose shifted tactics. He addressed a small group near the dessert display. "Laney's always been sensitive," he said lightly, as if sharing a charming anecdote. "Brilliant, but sensitive." Someone laughed politely. "She's just not built for chaos," he added. "And sudden money can create chaos." This time, several heads turned more directly. Money. The word had landed. Delaney felt the attention gather around her, like a soft spotlight. Jose smiled warmly at the group. "We'll get through it," he said. "I'm handling the logistics." Handling. The narrator recognized the pattern. Frame her as fragile. Frame himself as steady. Lay groundwork in case legal proceedings became visible. Delaney stepped closer, not into confrontation, but into clarity. "Jose," she said quietly, "please stop speaking about me in the third person." The group fell silent. He blinked. "I'm just explaining," he said. "Explaining what she asked. That you're overwhelmed." She held his gaze. "I am not overwhelmed." Her tone was even, measured. The simplicity of it unsettled him more than accusation would have. He laughed softly, trying to recover. "See," he said to the group, "she does this. Very composed on the outside." The implication hung there, unstable beneath the surface. Delaney did not respond. She turned instead to Pastor Green. "Pastor," she said calmly, "if anyone has concerns about my well-being, they're welcome to ask me directly." Her composure shifted the room's center of gravity. The narrator observed it carefully. People did not see hysteria. They saw steadiness. Jose sensed it too. His smile tightened slightly. "We should take this private," he said. "There's nothing private about reputation," she replied. He lowered his voice edge, creeping in. "You're humiliating me." She looked at him. "I'm standing." For a moment, something raw flashed behind his eyes. Not guilt, not regret, loss of control. Detective Bennett, standing discreetly near the entrance as part of standard monitoring for protective order compliance, observed the exchange without intervening. Jose noticed her. Recognition dawned slowly. He stepped back. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. To the room he offered one last gentle sigh. "I'm just trying to protect my wife." Delaney did not correct him. She did not need to, because now every word he had spoken existed in a space filled with witnesses. The narrator understood the significance. Jose had attempted to build a narrative of instability. But in public, without control of environment or timing, his performance felt rehearsed, forced. People sensed imbalance. Later, as the event wound down, Delaney walked to her car alone. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired, the kind of tired that follows clarity. Her phone buzzed as she reached the driver's seat. A message from Detective Bennett. "He's pushing narrative. That helps us." Delaney stared at the screen for a moment. Helps us. Not emotionally, legally. She started the engine and drove home. Behind her in the church hall, Jose lingered longer than necessary, explaining himself to anyone who would listen. "I just want what's best for her," he repeated. He did not yet realize that repetition without evidence eventually sounds hollow. Back at the house, Delaney locked the door and stood in the quiet kitchen. The kettle sat untouched. The cameras remained in place. The trust was active. The bank alerts were secure. The lab results were filed. The protective order was documented. And now, there were witnesses to his narrative shaping. The narrator saw the convergence forming. Financial motive, chemical administration, public portrayal of instability, violation of contact order. Each thread thin alone, together undeniable. Delaney opened her notebook. April 24th, community fundraiser. Jose publicly referenced financial stress and my sensitivity. Witnesses present. She paused, then added, remained calm. She closed the notebook gently, because control had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The formal charges were filed on a Monday. Attempted unlawful administration of a controlled substance. Reckless endangerment. Violation of a protective order. The language was clinical. It did not describe kitchens or tea, or the way a man could say, "I'm helping you," while dissolving powder into porcelain. It did not need to. Delaney read the charging document in Gregory Whitmore's office without visible reaction. The paper was thick official, embossed with a seal that made everything feel both distant and irreversible. "He's been released on bond," Whitmore said evenly. "Conditions include no direct or indirect contact, no third-party messaging, no proximity to the residence." Delaney nodded. "He will likely argue lack of intent," Whitmore continued, "that he was assisting you, that dosage was miscalculated, that there was no malicious objective." She absorbed this calmly. "Intent is difficult to prove," she said. "Yes," Whitmore replied, "unless a pattern exists." Pattern. They both understood the word. 3 recorded incidents, escalating dosage, simultaneous financial maneuvering, public claims of her instability. Patterns were stronger than accusations. Across town, Jose sat in his attorney's office reviewing the same charges. His attorney, Daniel Hargrove, was experienced, precise, and expensive. "You cannot contact her again," Hargrove said firmly. "Not directly, not indirectly, not through church members, not through mutual friends. I wasn't trying to hurt her," Jose insisted. "That's not the point right now." Jose leaned back in his chair, frustration rising. "She's overreacting," he said. "She got money and panicked." Hargrove looked at him steadily. "Did you put prescription medication in her drink?" Jose hesitated. "It was just a sleep aid," he said finally. "She wasn't sleeping. Without telling her, I didn't want to scare her." Hargrove exhaled slowly. "The problem," he said carefully, "is not what you intended. It's what it looks like." The narrator observed that Jose still believed perception could be negotiated. But the lab results did not negotiate. Back at Maple Ridge Public Library, Delaney moved through the stacks with measured quiet. She had informed her supervisor of personal legal matters without elaboration. The town knew something had happened. Small towns always knew. But she did not offer narrative. Mrs. Hathaway approached her near the reference desk. "I heard there's been difficulty," the older woman said gently. "There has," Delaney replied. "I hope you're taking care of yourself." "I am," and she was. Every morning, she reviewed the case file updates sent by Detective Bennett. Every evening, she logged any attempted contact, even silence, if silence felt intentional. On Wednesday afternoon, Avery Collins drove up from Denver to sit with her in the living room. Avery did not bring sympathy. She brought clarity. "He'll try to frame this as a misunderstanding," Avery said, folding her hands on her lap. "He'll emphasize marriage, concern, emotional strain. He already has," Delaney replied. Avery studied her friend carefully. "You're not angry. I'm clear." That was truer. Anger would have required surprise. There had been no surprise, only confirmation. "Do you ever wonder if you should have confronted him the first night?" Avery asked gently. Delaney considered that. "If I had," she said, "there would be no video." Avery nodded. "And if there were no video," Delaney continued, "there would only be his version." The narrator understood the weight of that truth. Silence had preserved evidence. Evidence had preserved reality. That evening, Delaney received notice of a preliminary hearing date. 2 weeks. Short enough to feel immediate, long enough for narrative battles to intensify. The following Sunday, Pastor Michael Green requested a meeting. She agreed. They sat in his office, bookshelves lined with scripture and community directories. "I'm concerned," he said gently. "Jose insists this is a misunderstanding." "I'm sure he does," Delaney replied calmly. "He says he was trying to help you sleep, without my consent." The pastor hesitated. "He believes you've been under immense stress." Delaney met his gaze. "Do I appear unstable to you?" He looked at her carefully. "No." "Then trust what you see." The narrator watched the pastor absorb that. Community figures often preferred harmony to truth, but harmony built on concealment collapses quickly. "I don't want the congregation divided," he said softly. "It won't be," Delaney replied. "Facts don't divide, stories do." When she left the church office, she felt no need to defend herself further, because documentation was already doing that. Meanwhile, Jose's attempts shifted. If he could not contact her directly, he would attempt proximity through property. A delivery arrived at the house Thursday afternoon. A new security system contract in both their names, signed digitally. Whitmore flagged it immediately. "Attempted financial entanglement," he said. "He's trying to maintain shared liability." Delaney canceled it within the hour. Bank alerts pinged twice that evening, attempted login from an unfamiliar device. Each alert became another entry, another timestamp, another pattern. Detective Bennett called Friday morning. "Prosecutor's office reviewed the footage again," she said. "They're adding an enhancement for premeditation." Delaney stood very still. Premeditation. The word felt heavy. "Is that likely to hold?" she asked. "Yes," Bennett said. "Repeated administration, concealed substance, concurrent financial maneuvering. It demonstrates planning. Planning." Jose had called it protection. The legal system called it something else. Saturday evening, Delaney sat at her kitchen table reviewing printed screenshots of emails, bank logs, voicemails. She organized them chronologically. Date, time, action. The narrator recognized the quiet discipline of it. She was not preparing for revenge. She was preparing for court. Across town, Jose paced in his apartment, rental frustration curdling into resentment. "She's destroying everything he told Hargrove over the phone." "No," Hargrove replied carefully. "She's documenting everything." Jose stopped pacing. "I was protecting our future," he insisted. "By drugging her without consent." Silence. "I never meant to hurt her." Intent, again. But in courtrooms, intent is measured by behavior repeated, not by tone. Sunday night, Delaney locked the doors and stood in the kitchen once more. The cameras were still there. The kettle was cold. The air felt different now, not tense, but stripped of illusion. She opened her notebook. April 30th. Charges filed. Hearing scheduled. Continued bank access attempts. She paused, then added, "No fear, only procedure." She closed the notebook gently. The narrator knew the hearing would not be dramatic. There would be no shouting, no cinematic confession. There would be documents, video, lab reports, and a pattern too precise to dismiss as concern. Jose still believed this could be negotiated. Delaney understood something simpler. Truth once documented carefully does not negotiate. It waits. The preliminary hearing did not begin with drama. It began with paperwork. Delaney sat beside Gregory Whitmore at the polished wooden table reserved for petitioners. Across the aisle, Jose sat with Daniel Hargrove, posture straight, expression composed. He wore a navy suit Delaney had once helped him choose for a hospital gala. It fit him well. He looked like a man accustomed to being trusted. The narrator understood the quiet irony of that. The courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and old air conditioning. A ceiling fan rotated lazily above, indifferent to the tension below. Judge Eleanor Price entered without ceremony. Case 24 CR 1187, the clerk announced. The State versus Jose Russell. The prosecutor assistant district attorney Marissa Doyle stood first. Your Honor, she began. The State will demonstrate a pattern of deliberate concealed administration of a controlled substance to the defendant's spouse, concurrent with attempts to obtain financial authority over significant assets. Significant assets. The phrase hovered carefully, no number mentioned yet. Hargrove rose smoothly. Your Honor, the defense maintains that this was a misguided attempt at assistance. There was no malicious intent, no desire to harm. Intent again. The judge nodded once. Proceed with evidence summary, she said. Marissa Doyle approached the evidence screen. Exhibit A, she said. Laboratory analysis confirming zolpidem tartrate in quantities exceeding recommended therapeutic dosage. The lab report appeared on screen, clinical language, clear conclusion. Exhibit B. Doyle continued video recordings from April 15th, 18 and 22. The first clip played. The kitchen appeared. Jose's back to the camera. The amber vial in his hand. The tap, the pour, the stir. No sound. Just movement. In the silent courtroom, the act felt louder than words. Delaney did not look at Jose. She looked at the screen. The second clip followed. Slightly faster movements, less hesitation. The third clip even quicker. Irritated. Pattern. Doyle paused the footage. Your Honor. She said the defendant did not inform Mrs. Russell that he was introducing a sedative into her drink. He did so repeatedly. Simultaneously, he presented documents granting him broad financial control in the event of her incapacity. She displayed copies of the power of attorney draft. The language was unmistakable. Incapacity. Hargrove stood. Your Honor, my client was concerned about his wife's stress levels. She had recently experienced a substantial financial event. Doyle glanced toward Delaney briefly. The State is aware, she said evenly. However, stress does not justify covert drugging. The judge's expression remained unreadable. Hargrove continued. There was no attempt to kill, no threats, no physical force, no consent, Doyle replied. The word landed firmly. No consent. The narrator observed something shift in the room. Intent was abstract. Consent was concrete. Judge Price leaned forward slightly. Mr. Hargrove. She said calmly, is it your position that administering prescription medication without knowledge or consent is acceptable within a marriage? Hargrove hesitated. No, Your Honor, he said carefully. Only that this was misguided, not malicious. Judge Price nodded once. Misguided actions can still be criminal. Silence settled. The prosecutor moved to the final set of exhibits. Exhibit C, she said. Bank records reflecting attempted access to newly established trust accounts. Multiple login attempts. Requests to alter contact information. All within days of the recorded incidents. Screenshots appeared, timestamps aligned neatly beside each attempt. Doyle continued. Exhibit D, voicemails in violation of protective order. Jose's voice filled the courtroom softly. "You're letting strangers get in your head. People will think you're unstable. I was helping you sleep." The word unstable echoed faintly against wooden walls. Delaney did not react outwardly, but the narrator knew she felt the weight of that repetition not as pain, but as confirmation. Doyle concluded. "The state asserts that the defendant's actions demonstrate premeditation chemical impairment combined with financial maneuvering." Hargrove requested the opportunity to question motive. "My client feared losing financial control," he said carefully. "Fear can produce poor judgment." The judge's gaze shifted to Jose briefly. "Fear does not authorize chemical coercion," she said evenly. She turned to Delaney. "Mrs. Russell, would you like to make a statement at this stage?" Whitmore glanced at her. She stood, not dramatically, just enough to be heard. "I did not consent to medication," she said calmly. "I documented what I saw, that is all. No accusation, no emotional appeal, just fact." She sat. The narrator understood the power of that restraint. The hearing lasted another 40 minutes. Arguments about bond conditions schedule for formal trial discovery timelines. In the end, Judge Price ruled probable cause is established. Charges will proceed to trial. Bond conditions remain. Additional restrictions regarding financial access are imposed. The gavel struck once, not loudly, but decisively. Outside the courtroom, reporters did not gather. The case had not yet attracted public spectacle. Jose exited with Hargrove, eyes forward. For a moment, his gaze met Delaney's across the hallway. He did not look angry. He looked confused, as if the script he had prepared was no longer being followed. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly as he passed close enough to hear, not close enough to violate order. Delaney did not answer. She did not need to. Whitmore guided her toward the exit. "Today was strong," he said quietly. "It was factual," she replied. Outside, the sky was clear. Colorado wind moved steadily across the courthouse steps. Avery stood waiting by her car. "You were calm," Avery said softly. "I was prepared." They drove back toward Maple Ridge in silence. The narrator reflected on what had shifted. The case was no longer a private suspicion. It was public record. Jose's defense would attempt to soften intent, to blur pattern, to suggest overreaction. But the timeline was linear, and linear timelines are difficult to distort. That evening, Delaney returned to her kitchen. The kettle remained untouched. The cameras were still mounted, though soon they would be removed. She opened her notebook one more time. May 6th. Preliminary hearing. Probable cause established. Trial scheduled. She paused, then added, "Stayed steady." She closed the notebook gently. The narrator knew the trial would not hinge on emotion. It would hinge on repetition. 3 pours, 3 videos, 3 attempts at control, and one woman who chose documentation over confrontation. The climax had not yet arrived, but the structure was set, and structures once built carefully do not collapse under pressure. They hold. The trial date was set for late summer. Colorado's sunlight sharpened everything that season: the sky, the mountains in the distance, the edges of truth. Delaney felt that sharpening inside her as well. Not anxiety, not dread. Focus. Discovery began quietly. Gregory Whitmore and the prosecutor's office exchanged documents with Daniel Hargrove in structured waves. Bank statements, metadata reports, device forensics. The cloud server logs confirming automatic uploads at precise times, unaltered, externally verified. The narrator understood something Jose was only beginning to grasp. The strength of a case is rarely found in a single dramatic moment. It is found in consistency. Hargrove requested access to Delaney's financial records. Whitmore complied within legal boundaries. Transparency was not a threat. There were no hidden withdrawals, no erratic transfers, no secret accounts beyond the documented trust. The trust itself became central. The Russell Educational Foundation Trust, neutral, structured, restricted. It existed before law enforcement intervention, before the warrant, before charges. Its creation date mattered. Hargrove attempted to argue that the trust demonstrated secrecy. Whitmore responded calmly in writing, "Prudent asset protection following significant windfall is standard practice." Attached were 3 expert statements from estate planners confirming the same. Procedure against narrative. Meanwhile, Jose's attorneys shifted strategy. If intent could not be softened entirely, perhaps Delaney's credibility could be questioned. A subpoena arrived requesting her personal journals. Whitmore anticipated this. "They will attempt to portray you as obsessive," he said gently. "Meticulous documentation can be reframed as paranoia." Delaney considered that. "Should I regret documenting?" she asked. "No," Whitmore replied. "We contextualize it." The journals were submitted under protective review. Each entry was dated, calm, descriptive. No hysteria, no exaggerated language. April 15th. Observed Jose add unknown powder. April 16th. Presented power of attorney referencing incapacity. April 22nd. Warrant executed. Even under scrutiny, the writing did not unravel. The narrator saw how powerful that would be in a courtroom. Documentation is rarely emotional. It is repetitive, and repetition tells its own story. 2 weeks before trial, the prosecutor requested a plea discussion. Jose rejected it. "I didn't try to kill her," he insisted. "That's not the only charge," Hargrove reminded him carefully. "I was helping." Hargrove paused before answering. "Help requires consent." Jose leaned back in his chair, frustration simmering beneath his composure. "She could have talked to me," he said. Hargrove looked at him steadily. "She did." Silence followed. In Maple Ridge, Delaney continued her routine. The library shelves did not know about court filings. Children still returned books late. Mrs. Hathaway still asked for historical fiction. But whispers traveled gently through town. At the grocery store, a woman approached her cautiously. "I heard about the court date," she said softly. "Are you all right?" "Yes," Delaney replied. "Was it really?" "Medication, yes." The woman's expression shifted from curiosity to something closer to respect. "That must have been frightening." "It was clarifying," Delaney said. "Clarifying." That word stayed with her, because once someone crosses a line quietly, the line becomes visible forever. Trial week arrived, without spectacle. The courtroom filled more than usual curious townspeople, a few reporters from Denver who had picked up the angle of lottery money and attempted chemical coercion. The prosecutor laid out the sequence clearly. 3 videos, 3 lab confirmations, 3 financial escalation attempts. Then the power of attorney draft, specifically the clause granting Jose authority in the event of mental instability. The phrase was projected on screen. The courtroom grew still. Hargrove objected to characterization. Judge Price allowed the clause as written. Delaney was called to the stand. She walked steadily, swore the oath, sat. Mrs. Russell, the prosecutor, began, "Did you consent to any medication being placed in your Tino? Did your husband inform you he was administering a sedative? No. Why did you document instead of confront?" Delaney considered her words carefully. "Because confrontation would have eliminated proof." The prosecutor nodded slightly. "And what did you observe in your husband's behavior after you told him about the lottery?" "He asked where the ticket was," she said. "He asked about access. He presented paperwork granting him authority over assets." "Did he ask if you were emotionally well?" "No." Hargrove approached for cross-examination. "Mrs. Russell," he began smoothly, "is it possible your husband misunderstood your stress? I was not stressed. You never appeared anxious, not to a degree requiring sedation." A faint ripple of restrained reaction moved through the courtroom. Hargrove continued, "You created a trust without informing your husband." "Yes." "Does that reflect mistrust? It reflects prudence." He paused. "You installed cameras in your kitchen?" "Yes." "That suggests suspicion. It reflects observation." Hargrove's voice sharpened slightly. "Did you ever express fear that your husband intended to kill you?" "No." The courtroom shifted again. The prosecutor looked up briefly. Hargrove seized it. So you did not believe he intended to kill you? I believed he intended to impair me, Delaney replied calmly. An impairment was sufficient. Silence. The narrator understood the precision of that answer. Intent to kill was not required. Intent to override consent was enough. The prosecution rested. The defense called no additional witnesses beyond Jose. He took the stand. His voice was controlled. I was trying to help her sleep, he repeated. Why not tell her? Hargrove asked. She was already overwhelmed. With what? With sudden wealth, he said before catching himself again. The prosecutor stepped forward. Mr. Russell, she said evenly, did you draft a power of attorney referencing your wife's mental instability? I was preparing for contingencies. Contingencies you helped create. He hesitated. I never meant harm. The prosecutor held up the vial photo. Did you administer this substance 3 times? Yes. Without consent, yes. The courtroom remained very still. Intent blurred. Consent did not. Closing arguments were restrained. The prosecutor focused on pattern. The defense focused on misguided concern. The jury deliberated less than a full day. When they returned, the verdict was delivered without flourish. Guilty on unlawful administration of a controlled substance. Guilty on reckless endangerment. Guilty on violation of protective order. Not attempted murder, but criminal. Jose did not look shocked. He looked deflated, as if something he had assumed would bend had refused. Delaney did not react visibly. The narrator saw what she felt, not triumph, not satisfaction. Relief. The structure had held. After sentencing was scheduled, she stepped outside the courthouse alone. Colorado wind moved steadily across the steps. Her phone buzzed. A message from Avery. You did not shout. You did not accuse. You proved. Delaney slipped the phone back into her bag, because proving had never required volume. Only patience. Sentencing did not draw a crowd. Trials attract curiosity. Consequences attract silence. The courtroom was half full that morning. Fewer reporters, fewer onlookers. Those who attended came not for spectacle, but for closure. Pastor Michael Green sat in the back row, hands folded. Avery occupied a seat near the aisle. Gregory Whitmore remained beside Delaney, posture steady, documents arranged neatly in a leather folder. Jose stood when the judge entered. He no longer wore the navy suit Delaney had once helped him choose. The jacket he wore today was darker, more severe. It fit slightly looser, as if the weeks since conviction had thinned him. Judge Eleanor Price reviewed the file in the measured quiet. Mr. Russell, she began, this court has considered the jury's findings, the pre-sentencing report, and the documented pattern of conduct. Pattern. The word had followed him from investigation to verdict. You administered a controlled substance to your spouse without her knowledge or consent on multiple occasions, the judge continued. You simultaneously attempted to secure financial authority, predicated upon her alleged instability. Jose's jaw tightened, but he did not interrupt. You have no prior criminal history, Judge Price acknowledged. However, the calculated nature of your actions, combined with the violation of protective orders, weighs heavily. The narrator observed something quiet inside Jose at that moment, not defiance, not denial. Recognition, not of wrongdoing as morality would frame it, but of consequence as law defines it. The sentence was delivered clearly: 18 months in state custody, probation thereafter, mandatory counseling, permanent protective order extended, restitution for legal and investigative costs. No theatrical gasp followed, no dramatic collapse, only the faint scratch of a pen as the clerk recorded the judgment. Mrs. Russell, the judge said, turning her gaze gently, you may speak if you wish. Whitmore glanced at Delaney. She rose. Her hands were steady. She did not step forward dramatically. She did not approach the bench. She spoke from where she stood. I did not ask for punishment, she said calmly. I asked for clarity. The courtroom remained still. I documented what happened, she continued. Because when someone alters your reality quietly, the only defense is record. She paused briefly. I hope counseling helps him understand that control is not protection. She sat. No applause, no tears, only quiet acknowledgement. Jose did not look at her as he was escorted away. Whether that was pride or shame, the narrator did not presume to decide. Outside, the air felt lighter than it had in months. Not because justice was loud, because it was finished. Whitmore walked with Delaney down the courthouse steps. You handled that well, he said softly. I handled it truthfully, she replied. Avery joined them moments later. That's it, Avery said. Criminally, it's done. Delaney nodded. Yes. But she understood something else. Criminal closure does not automatically dissolve marriage. There remained civil proceedings, formal dissolution, division of marital property, restructuring of shared liabilities. The lottery claim itself had been processed quietly through the trust weeks earlier. Public announcement had been delayed strategically until the criminal verdict concluded. Now, with sentencing complete, the final administrative step could proceed. The Russell Educational Foundation Trust would claim the winnings under its registered entity name. Jose would have no access, no leverage. The paperwork for dissolution was filed that afternoon. Irreconcilable conduct. That phrase felt almost sterile compared to what had unfolded. Jose's attorney did not contest aggressively. Conviction limits leverage. Negotiations proceeded briskly. The house in Maple Ridge would transfer fully to Delaney. Jose would retain his retirement accounts. No spousal support would be granted due to criminal findings. The narrator observed the symmetry of it. He had tried to secure authority through impairment. He left with none. Weeks later, the official lottery claim was announced. Not with flashing cameras, not with oversized checks. A brief press release. The Russell Educational Foundation Trust has claimed the recent $730 million jackpot. The trust will prioritize educational grants and community initiatives. No interviews, no photographs, just structure. Reporters attempted to identify the beneficiary. Whitmore declined comment. Marianne Keene handled fiduciary inquiries with polite firmness. Money entered the trust under controlled disbursement schedules. Scholarship committees were formed. Local school districts received anonymous funding for technology upgrades. Maple Ridge Public Library received a discreet endowment grant, anonymous but widely suspected. Delaney continued her work there for 3 more months. Not out of necessity, out of choice. Routine still mattered. One afternoon, Mrs. Hathaway approached her at the circulation desk. You look different, the older woman said gently. Different how, lighter? Delaney considered that. Quieter, she corrected. Because lightness suggests relief, quiet suggests resolution. The cameras were removed from the kitchen. The kettle remained in its place, but no one reached for it except her. Sometimes she brewed chamomile for herself. She measured it carefully. No hidden additions, consent restored. The narrator understood the significance of that small act. Trust is not rebuilt through apology. It is rebuilt through autonomy. On the day Jose was formally transferred to custody, Delaney did not attend. She did not need to see handcuffs. She did not need spectacle. The sentence existed whether she watched or not. Instead, she sat at her kitchen table and reviewed the final dissolution decree. Russell v. Russell. Marriage terminated. Assets allocated. Protective order permanent. She signed the last page with the same steady handwriting she had used the night she first documented the vial. April 15th. The date felt distant now, but not erased. That evening, she walked through her house slowly. The hallway closet stood open. The jacket was gone. The shelf where it once hung was empty. Empty is not absence, it is space reclaimed. The narrator, who had known the ending from the first pour of powder into porcelain, watched her stand in that doorway without bitterness. No victory speech, no whispered accusation. Only a quiet recognition control had been removed not through confrontation, but through patience. The legal system had not moved dramatically. It had moved deliberately. And that had been enough. Autumn arrived slowly in Maple Ridge. The cottonwoods along Delaney Russell's street turned from green to a pale, deliberate gold, as if even the trees understood that change did not have to be violent to be complete. The house felt different now, not larger, not emptier, just honest. There were no hidden vials in jacket pockets, no late-night calculations whispered into the dark, no careful listening for shifts in breathing beside her. The kettle sat where it always had, but it belonged entirely to her. The narrator, who had known from the first quiet tap of glass against porcelain that this story would end not with shouting, but with signatures, observed her one morning, standing at the kitchen counter, measuring loose-leaf tea with deliberate care. Chamomile. 2 teaspoons, hot water poured clean. Nothing added. Consent restored in its smallest form. The Russell Educational Foundation Trust began its work without ceremony. Marianne Keene managed distributions with methodical restraint. Grant applications were reviewed. Scholarships quietly awarded. A rural district 2 counties over received funding for updated science labs. A literacy program in Denver secured multi-year stability. The trust's name appeared on official documents. Delaney's did not. That was intentional. Wealth, she understood, attracts noise. Impact prefers structure. At Maple Ridge Public Library, a new reading room opened in late October. Fresh paint, updated lighting, comfortable seating funded by an anonymous donor. At the ribbon-cutting, Pastor Michael Green spoke briefly about community generosity. He did not mention courtrooms. He did not mention sedatives. He did not mention instability. Delaney stood in the back of the room, hands folded, listening. When the ribbon was cut, applause filled the space. She did not step forward to claim credit. The narrator understood something important in that restraint. Justice had not made her louder. It had made her freer. Jose remained where the court had placed him. Counseling sessions were part of his sentence. Reports filtered back through legal channels, compliance noted progress, described in cautious language. He had written a letter once. Through his attorney, it was brief. "I never meant to hurt you," it said. Whitmore advised no response. Delaney agreed. Intent had been weighed already. Consent had been established as the missing element. There was nothing left to clarify. The house underwent small changes. She repainted the bedroom a soft gray. She removed the hallway closet shelf where the jacket once hung and replaced it with open storage for winter coats. Physical rearrangement matters. It tells the body what the law has already declared. One afternoon, Avery visited again. They sat at the kitchen table with tea, both cups identical, both untouched by anything but leaves and water. "Do you ever feel angry?" Avery asked quietly. Delaney considered that. "Sometimes," she said. "But anger is loud. I prefer quiet." Avery smiled faintly. "You were always like that." "Not always," Delaney replied. "I learned." The narrator reflected on that truth. Quiet is not the absence of reaction. It is the presence of control. Months later, the final civil paperwork arrived, confirming the permanent division of assets and the irrevocable structure of the trust. No appeals filed. No further motions. Closure did not announce itself with bells. It arrived as an envelope. Delaney signed the acknowledgement form and placed it in her filing cabinet beside lab reports, bank logs, and the original trust documents. The file was thick now. She ran her fingers lightly across its edge. Paper can carry weight without raising its voice. On a cool November evening, she stood on her porch watching the sun lower behind distant hills. The street was quiet. Children rode bicycles in widening circles. A dog barked once, then stopped. Normalcy had returned, not the fragile normalcy that hides fractures, but the grounded kind that follows repair. The narrator knew that some would ask whether she forgave him. Forgiveness was not part of the legal proceedings, nor was it required for peace. Peace had come through boundaries, through evidence, through refusal to argue when documentation would suffice. She did not rebuild her life with declarations. She rebuilt it with systems, Passwords changed, accounts secured, trust funded, doors locked at night not out of fear but habit. She brewed tea only when she wanted it. She slept without listening for hidden movements. And when she thought of Jose, it was not with hatred. It was with clarity. He had mistaken control for care. She had mistaken silence for safety. Both errors had been corrected. The difference was that hers had not harmed anyone. In December, she traveled quietly to a small university ceremony where the first Russell Foundation scholarship recipients were announced. She did not attend on stage. She sat in the back row as a young woman accepted an award for graduate study in forensic science. The irony did not escape her. The student spoke about truth and evidence and the importance of documentation in protecting the vulnerable. Delaney listened without smiling. Some lessons ripple outward. After the ceremony, she returned home alone. Snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the cottonwoods in white. Inside the house was warm. She removed her coat and placed it in the hallway closet on the new open shelf. No pockets to check, no secrets to fear. The narrator, who had seen the arc from humiliation in a church hall to quiet restoration in a kitchen, understood that power does not always shift through confrontation. Sometimes it shifts through endurance, through patience, through the decision not to shout when proof will speak louder. Delaney turned off the kitchen light and moved toward the bedroom. The notebook still rested in her drawer. She opened it once more and wrote a final entry. December 12th. Trust active. Scholarship awarded. House steady. She paused, then added, peace is documented. She closed the notebook gently and placed it back. No triumphant music. No final argument. Only a woman who had once watched powder fall into her tea and chose not to scream, but to save the moment. The cottonwoods outside stood bare now. Winter would come fully. And then in time, it would pass. Some betrayals arrive loudly. Others dissolve quietly like something unseen stirred into a cup meant to comfort. Delaney Russell did not fight her battle with accusations. She did not counter humiliation with humiliation. She did not answer manipulation with noise. She answered it with record, with timestamps, with restraint. In a world that often rewards volume, she chose patience. In a marriage where control disguised itself as protection, she chose documentation over confrontation. Justice did not arrive dramatically. It arrived methodically through lab reports, bank logs, and video files that did not blink or forget. And when it was finished, she did not celebrate a man's downfall. She reclaimed her autonomy. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to reflect on where quiet strength exists in your own life. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Stories like this connect us across distance. And if you believe that truth deserves patience and that dignity can outlast deception, consider subscribing. Not for noise, for clarity.